Thank you for joining me today on our way to Qumran, the Dead Sea Scrolls, meaning the Kohen HaGadol, the high priest, the leader over there, and the dramas that were going on between there and Yerushalayim. But first, let's make our way to there. We're going to be heading, as we can see on the map over here, we're going to be heading out from Yerushalayim. The drive to Qumran is not very far, half an hour, 40 minutes, into the Judean desert. Along the way, meet the camels. We're going to go below sea level. Bit of this atmosphere of arriving over there. The views that we're going to get are as follows. Now, look, let's leave the 21st century, because the era that we're talking about is 2,000 years ago, end of Second Temple era. And if we're joining this Judean desert stream on our way to Qumran, leaving the corruption behind, they call it corruption, leaving their way of life behind to a different kind of way of life, a more pure way of life as they see it, this is the view that they're going to be seeing. The Judean desert, Midbar Yehuda, that we're traveling through as we're making our short drive from Yerushalayim to Qumran. And here we go. Come join me from Qumran. I'm inviting you to join me as we delve into Dead Sea Scrolls and the daily life of the people back then. Welcome to the Judean desert, to Midbar Yehuda, and welcome to Qumran. Today we're going to be talking about an absolutely fascinating topic, and that is life over here, daily life of Jews who were living here 2,000 years ago in Qumran, the sect, the stream of the Essenes, and maybe others. What did their daily life look like? What did their weekly cycle look like? Their yearly cycle look like? Who were the people that were over here? How did you get accepted to become part of the community that's living over here? We're going to delve into this and to so much more as we make our way through the site of Qumran and through the daily life of the people who lived here 2,000 plus years ago. It's going to be fascinating. Come on. So as I like to say, the when and the where. The where is Qumran, a northern area of the Dead Sea, a Judean desert. The when, 2,000 years ago, end of Second Temple era. But just as fascinating as going back to what happened 2,000 years ago is, in my opinion, it's almost just as fascinating to understand how this was all discovered. And it was all thanks to a lost goat. Let's join Bedouins from the Ta'amre tribe, who at some point back in 1946-47, let's make the screen fun over here, here we go. Back in sometime in 1946-47, before November 47, they're herding their sheep, they lose a goat, they're herding their goats, they lose a goat who walks off into the mountain, and two of these Bedouins from the Ta'amre tribe are going to go following the goat, and they're going to come up to the area of these caves that are over here. So making their way through, they're going to see a wall in one of the caves, they're going to throw a rock into another one, where they're going to hear a ping, and one of these Bedouins, whose name is Muhammad Adib, is going to come back a couple days later, and he's going to make maybe the greatest archaeological discovery, definitely one of the greatest in history. He is going to find the first Dead Sea Scrolls of the thousands that will be found, thousands of pieces that will be found over the next several years. Now what he's going to then do is he's going to make the worst business deal in history, and he's found 7 scrolls, a few of them in a jug, a few other just lying around, and he's going to sell them for nothing, for peanuts. He doesn't understand what he's just found. He sees these scrolls with ancient writing. He sells it to a Christian businessman whose name is Communal from Bethlehem. He's going to call Professor Sukenik, professor of history, Hebrew University. We see him in the picture over here. He's going to say, I have something interesting, don't know what it is, come check it out. Professor Sukenik is going to get on a bus and he's going to come to Kando. The date is November 29th, 1947. That is the date that the United Nations is voting for partition. Faithfully on that date, he gets to Kando. He sees these scrolls. He realizes, sees the ancient Hebrew writing. He takes out, a little money from his pocket. He says, I have enough money here to buy 3 scrolls, not all 7. And he takes 3 of the 7 original scrolls home. He starts reading it, and he'll later describe that as he's reading this Hebrew, and he's understanding it's from 2,000 years ago, from one of the Judean desert sects. We'll talk about the sects and the streams briefly soon enough. He says, I'm reading it. I'm realizing that I'm writing from the last time we had Hebrew independence in the land of Israel 2,000 years ago, as I'm listening to United Nations vote for partition to give us our independence for the first time 2,000 years later. Fate had it that it was on that day. Of the 7 original scrolls that were found in the caves, Professor Sukenik comes home with 3. 4 of them make their way eventually, without getting into detail, to the U.S. and the Hebrew University will buy the other 4 for $250,000 by 1954. And by that point, we have the 7 original scrolls that you'll find today in the Shrine of the Book in the Israel Museum. What are these scrolls, and why are they so dramatic and important? Well, I like to start by saying it sounds like the beginning of a joke, a prophet, a high priest, and following the rules a little bit of some of the scrolls. So in the picture over here, we see 3 of the 7 original scrolls that were found. The first one, maybe the most famous, is the Isaiah scroll. The entire book of Yeshayahu, the entire book of Isaiah, a scroll which when it's spread out completely, is over 7 meters, a good 23, 24 feet long. The entire thing was found. If that's the Isaiah scroll that was found, a couple of the other original 7 scrolls that were found is what's called the Habakkuk commentary. Now, what happens is the people who are living in Qumran 2,000 years ago, what they're going to do is they're going to take different books from the Tanakh. Habakkuk is one of them, from the Bible. He's going to take one of them. And they're going to write down the passages, the psukim, but in them they're going to write their own commentary. They'll say Habakkuk, who prophesied and wrote down what he did years ago, didn't understand what he was prophesying, but we today understand it, and this is our commentary on it. That's why it's called Pesher Habakkuk, or Habakkuk commentary. And if we said it today that we're going to meet the leader, the high priest, in Qumran, maybe this is our first time meeting him, because what we'll read about in a lot of these scrolls is the tensions between the teacher of righteousness, okay, is the leader, want to call him the high priest, the leader of his community in Qumran, as opposed to the wicked priest, the high priest in Jerusalem. Now, we started with a picture, a video of us traveling through the Judean desert. Said, imagine we're doing this 2,000 years ago. We have a group of people leaving Jerusalem, and they'll write in the scrolls that in Jerusalem, that's where you have a lot of wickedness going on, evil going on, sinning going on. The tensions between the Kohanim, the priests of Jerusalem, and the leadership there, and the leadership that's going to Qumran is tremendous. They talk about the people of light against the people of dark. We're going to be meeting this from time to time as we make our way through the scrolls. Habakkuk commentary that we'll come back to from time to time definitely is a good example of that. But not only that, we also have scrolls like the community roll, Serech HaYachad as it's called, and it's a manual of discipline. And it's talking about the rules of the people living in Qumran. Very, very strict. The rules of how do you get accepted? What do you do in order to get accepted? What are the behavior rules on a daily basis over there? And we're going to also be touching that a little bit as we make our way through Qumran and through the scrolls. What's all the fuss about? I brought a few examples of the scrolls, but the big picture, if we go out a little bit, what are these scrolls? Okay, so we mentioned Habakkuk commentary, we mentioned Isaiah. What's it a part of? So, what has been found in the caves in the Judean desert, close to the Qumran area. Qumran is an archaeological site that we're going to be making our way through. Found starting in 1947 and into the mid-50s when excavations are going on. There were 250 caves that were excavated. And in 11 of these caves, they found scrolls. They found about 20,000 parts of scrolls that were put together. It's like a puzzle. You find the piece, you got to put it together. Put together to about 930 different scrolls. That's the number. When are they from? When do they date to? They date back to about 2,200 plus years ago, okay, more or less, to over a period of about 300 years, all the way to the destruction of the Second Temple. The Romans will conquer the area in the year 68 of the Common Era. So we're talking about 1,900 years ago. They date back to 2,200 years ago to 1,900 years ago, all of these scrolls. Now, what was found over there, I like to split it up into 3 different categories. One of them, they found the oldest Tanakhi biblical texts found in the world, dating back to over 2,000 years ago. They found parts of almost all of the 24 books of the Tanakh. The one book that wasn't found is the book of Esther. For whatever reason, didn't find it there, but they found parts of other books. The example of Isaiah, Yeshayahu, the entire scroll, just one of them. In addition to that, sectarian scrolls, such as a Habakkuk commentary or Serech HaYachad, the community rule scroll, which talks about their daily life and beliefs 2,000 years ago. We're going to be getting into that because soon enough we're going to be walking hand in hand with them in their daily life and using quotes from the sectarian scrolls. In addition to that, a third kind of scroll that was found that we're going to be less getting into today are the external texts, other scrolls that weren't included in the Tanakh and the Bible, such as the beautiful, beautiful poetry of Ben Sirah and others. That's external text. That's for a different virtual tour. So, as we're coming over here to Qumran, it's not a large site. It's an organized site. It's a national park. You can walk around. You can see the wooden area that you just make your way through and see the rooms that were used for a variety of purposes that we'll get to in a minute, how the water flowed through, the mikvahot, the ritual baths that played a very central role. So we're just doing a 360. In the meantime, in the background, we can see the mountains of the Judean desert, Midbar Yehuda. As we're going from west to south, we can see the beautiful cliffs, and in a minute, as we veer east, we'll also see the Dead Sea, because we're literally at the northern end of the Dead Sea. But in order to delve into all the archaeology over here, let us talk about the daily activity. Now, Josephus Flavius, usually I wrote right where my quotes are from, for whatever reason I forgot to here, but Josephus Flavius writes books such as Jewish History and War of the Jews, and he'll describe the daily life over here of what's going on. Now, Josephus is going to talk about Essenes. You need to understand, if we're going into the mindset and the time frame of 2,000 years ago, at then a Second Temple, we have many different streams in Judaism at the time. Some of the most known are the Pharisees, the Prushim, that Judaism of today is pretty much a continuum of, the Sadducees, the Tzdukim, which are more the elite, the priests, the Kohanim, the Esseim, who believe very much in disconnecting themselves with daily life, with daily society back then, purity and impurity being much more rigid in their rules and in their laws. This is a description by Josephus of the Essenes' day of life. Now, it fits to a degree with the descriptions of daily life in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Dead Sea Scrolls, it doesn't say, hi, we're the Essenes. It has Srach HaYachad group, it has Brit HaMesek group, different descriptions of daily life over there. Some of them don't exactly always fit exactly with one another's daily life. It doesn't always exactly fit with Josephus' description, but the overall feeling is that it fits to Josephus' description of the Essenes, meaning we had Essenes over there. We had those who were more rigid, less rigid. Maybe we had other groups that were similar to the Essene. A whole academic course, which here isn't the place. I was just trying to give a bit of a contextual connection over here. Okay, daily life, as Josephus describes of these scenes, it also fits in to the archaeology that we're going to be walking through in a minute. Before sunrise, you put up certain prayers. You wake up in the morning with your prayers. All right? After you're done with the prayers, you go to work. Every one of them are sent away to exercise some of those arts wherein they are skilled until the 5th hour. What are these arts? What do they do? We'll get to that soon enough. And then we get to one of the highlights of the day, and that's the food. The gathering for the food is the ritual bath, They assemble themselves together into one place, clothe themselves in white veils, and they then bathe their bodies in cold water. Purity and impurity. Mikvaot, ritual baths, a very central part of life. Once they did that, you'll come out, food, gathering place, key part of the day, and then after that you go, after a pure manner, the mikveh, into the dining room. The baker lays them loaves in order. All right, you ate, you sat. We'll talk about what happened over there more as we're actually standing virtually inside of the Cheder Ochel, the room where they would eat. When they're done, they lay aside their white garments and betake themselves to their labor again until the evening. So we have breakfast, or a late breakfast, a brunch maybe today we'd call it, and then after that, go back to work in the afternoon hours, and then back, return home to supper in the same manner. Ritual bath again, supper, and then they have their night learning that we'll get to. Let's go from the words, let's go from the text out into the reality. First of all, what we can see over here, we wake up in the morning. The prayers will be to the east. This is a picture taken, thank you to Google Earth, sort of from above, looking to the east, the sun rising. You might say, but prayers are towards Jerusalem. That's true after the destruction of the Second Temple. We're not there yet, all right? The Second Temple still exists. And over here they're praying with their backs to Jerusalem because the tensions with Jerusalem, the corruption in their eyes that was going on in Jerusalem, they've come to a new place and they're facing the rising sun as they say their morning prayers. They leave their morning prayers and they go to work. What would they work with? So what was found on one of the sides, the southern side of Qumran, So we can see this area with the stones on the floor. Archaeology, excavations going on, they're going to find about 100,000 date pits. Now, when you drive down in the area today, you'll see a lot of palm trees. When you read sources from the Mishnah, for example, they'll talk a lot about the palm trees of the areas such as Jericho. Jericho is not far. So it makes very much sense that the palm trees with the dates are going to grow in these areas. The work over here with the dates, in addition to that, they'll sit as part of their jobs. They're going to make like different salim baskets made out of the branches and the sinew of palm trees. So dates playing a central role over here in this area is part of their daily work. In addition to that, they'll go for a walk. If the little yellow sign over here up on top is of Qumran, it's just a hour walk, a little bit south, a mile or so. So we know today is Enot Sukim and Fashcha, which is a beautiful place to go with family, be in water, talk about the balsam perfume for a different tour. In this case, the description is they go over there to work with the palm trees, with the dates. So that's one thing. Another thing that we can talk about is a pottery workshop. They made pottery for their own use. And we're going to get back to the pottery soon enough. We'll see what it was used for in some of the remains. But working over here in the pottery workshop, we can see a huge kiln where they brought the materials that was needed, the clay that was needed in order to create the pottery. So that'll also be part of the daily work. In addition to that, we have what's called the scrolls workshop. Now, the scrolls workshop, whenever I think of it, and let's walk inside. Look, this is key, because at the end of the day, what tells us what happened over here? What gives us so much of a background to 2,000 years ago, what was going on back then? It's what happened inside this room and another room that we're going to see soon enough that was taking place over here. If some of the people are working with the food, and some of the people are working with making baskets and whatnot, and some of the people are working with the pottery, this room over here was a 2-story room originally, and inside of this 2-story room over here, which is called the scriptorium, first of all, what was found were plaster benches, all right, 3 inkwells, tables. Now, the tables, that's not where you would sit and write the scrolls. You have a lot of preparation work to do with the scrolls. You need to cut it, you need to sew it, you need to create lines, you need to prepare it. And then, after doing that, on the benches, on the tables that were found over there, you'd sit on the benches on the side, and you would sit and you'd write the actual scrolls. So if we move up a little bit, here we already walked in, can talk about some of the things that was found over here. As I mentioned, the inkwells, scroll tabs and ties, writing implements, bronze needle. Again, you are sewing. Everything was written on scrolls and on pieces of scrolls, so you have to sew it together. Tables and benches, we mentioned that a minute ago. Doing sewing, cutting, marking pages, making the lines, and of course also the writing. And if we're talking about the writing that's going on, and we're talking about the high priest, again, we're talking about a period of over 200 years of settling over here, different streams of different groups. We're talking about a variety of leaders over here. Let's meet them. So one of the streams is called Brit HaMesek, and he'll talk about his influence, all right, of teaching. If we read on the left side, we shall educate the many regarding the activities of God and have them understand his wonders and yearnings of the world. Another scroll that was found, which is a sectarian scroll, is called the Thanksgiving Hymns, Megillat HaHodayot. I like a lot of times to think of it as like another version of Psalm, of Psalm of Sefer Tehillim. And if we're talking about another version of Psalm of Sefer Tehillim, there are a lot of blessings of God, thanking God. Okay, the leader thanking God, praising God. Hodayot, to the teacher, thanking God for rescue of Belial of Sain and providing him justice to recount God's greatness and justice. So we have education, we have thanking God, we have praising God from the leader over here, and I can almost imagine them sitting over there in the middle of the day, sitting and writing the scrolls. Personal level, I'd rather think of them sitting there in the winter, not in the summer without air conditioning, but that's just me. If we continue along, though, We've gone up in the morning, we've prayed, we've gone to work, we've sat on a variety of different works, amongst them sitting on the scrolls, and now we're continuing on in the later morning hours, and here we're coming to a couple of the key parts of what happens on a daily basis. First of all, water, mikvaot, ritual baths, purity and impurity, tum'ah and tahara, play such a central role in this world. And the question can be, where does the water come from? Now, if you look out into the mountainous region over here, the mountains of Yehuda, Hare Yehuda, we're looking westward, and you'll have dry riverbeds coming from there, you'll have cliffs coming from there, and what happens is when it rains further west of there, further towards the direction of Jerusalem, for example, you'll have flash floods making their way through. And this is the whole idea, and this is the trick, to trap the water that is making its way through the mountains. Dams here and there, and eventually leading to this route over here, and water that's going to flow into the root of the mikvaot, of the ritual baths, that we're going to walk through soon enough. So let's just walk along with it a little bit. It's very cool because you can make your way to the site. You can walk along the archaeology. You can also walk along this path over here, and this path eventually will lead out to the mountains. And here I'm picking up my phone, and you can see where the source of the water comes from. Now that we have the water, look, we have a dozen mikvaot, a dozen ritual baths that were found in Qumran. You can see the path on the left, the wooden path that you can walk in order to walk along them and see them. Of course, you can't actually enter inside. Now, again, for a mikvah, for which ritual bath, you need water naturally flowing, naturally making its way through in order to make its way into the mikvah. You're not allowed to actually physically come with a bucket of water, jug of water, and pour it inside. Purity and impurity plays a very central role, which means there's different entrance and different exit into the mikvah. So let me come back for a minute. Let's scroll this back. Ooh, there we go. We can see right over here, we can see the steps on the left side and the steps on the right side. The steps on the left side are wide. Assumably, those who are still tameh, impure, coming from their morning activities, their work that we just talked about, they're going to go down here into the water. But when they're done, they're going to come out from another set of steps that is narrow. God forbid they should go up the same set of steps that someone tameh, not pure, is going down, because if you touch one another, the person who's already gone down into the water and is now considered tahor, pure, will be impure and has to go through the whole process once again. A lot of different ritual baths, and to get a bit of a feel of what people experienced back then, it says in the community rule, it says, and by the Spirit of holiness, which links him with his truth, he is cleansed of all his sins. Okay, physically cleaning yourself, spiritually cleansing. The physical act of going to the mikvah is spiritually cleansing yourself. And we can continue walking along the mikvaot over here. This is, for whatever reason, this is my favorite one when I go. You sort of walk up to it, and you can really see it's a large mikvah. You have the double lines over here in the middle. And it's for the same reason that we said before, you have separate steps. The wider side, in this case the left side, is the side for the impure, the tameh, to go down, and then you come up the narrow side, and this side, the right side, is tahor, someone who's pure. The entire time as we're walking through Qumran, or most of the time at least, you have the aqueduct with water making its way through. And as I mentioned before, there are about a dozen mikvaot, a dozen ritual baths inside. Now, the water sits and eventually gets dirty. And people continuously using the same mikvah, of course, the water will get even that much more dirtier. No problem. You've cleansed yourself. One mikvah is already out of use. It's really dirty and disgusting. You don't want to go in. You'll continue to the next mikvah, which is still clean, relatively clean, because you have not used it yet. And until the next flash flood, which will wash the water out and change the water. We'll continue walking along. Of course, not only water for mikvah, for ritual baths, but we also have over here, as we make our way through, let me control this and walk around. As we're making our way along, this is a water cistern. Okay, water for all the other purposes, not just a ritual bath. Drinking, for example, is important at any point, especially in the desert. So we continue, though, to walk around. If that was on our right, on our left, we're going to see Another mikveh, I took a picture of a few just to really give you this feeling of how many mikvahot. You're literally surrounded most of the time you're walking through here by mikvahot, by ritual baths. Another one over here with the double crossing. Again, we have a video. I think you get the idea. And now that we've gone into one of the mikvahot, into one of the ritual baths, let's go to the place where we have our communal meeting, our communal meal. We're going to make our way in to the dining hall and take a look as we walk in. And now we're going to make a left in the dining hall. We see it's long. It's large. You could fit up to 150 people inside over here. So we're making our way in. If we're the leader, the high priest, or the leader coming inside, we're seeing our people over here. But how do people walk in? Do you walk in talking? Do you walk in quietly? Are there rules? Is there an expectation from the high priest how to behave over here? Is there an expectation from the rest of the people how to behave over here? You can imagine people sitting in rows and lines, a little differently throughout the years maybe. To answer that, here we get a picture of the dining hall. Oh, here we go. Dining hall once again, standing inside. And let's see. We have a couple sources over here for the rules inside the dining hall. One of them is from Josephus Flavius, who gives a bit of a technical explanation, and he says the baker lays the loaves in order. In a minute, we'll also see the room where the baker and the cook comes from. The baker lays them loaves in order, and the cook also brings a single plate of one sort of food, and sets it before every one of them. But a priest says, here's the priest, okay, we have the leader. A priest says grace before meat, and when he has dined, says grace again after meat. Okay, that's Josephus describing. Again, Josephus, a historian who lives back then 2,000 years ago, wasn't necessarily in Qumran, but he understands what's going on there. Now let's read a description of one of the sectorial sect sources, descriptions of the community rule, Sarach HaYachad, the manual of discipline. How do you behave inside? Any person of Israel who wants to volunteer his opinion to the group discussion, the man who heads the group, again, the priest, the leader, shall check his intelligence and wisdom. I think we can use that today with a lot of activities. Before someone opens their mouth, make sure they know what they're talking about. Next rule, whoever interrupts the speech of another member was expelled from the common meal for 10 days. That's a serious punishment. There are a series of rules in Sarach HaYachad and the manual of discipline of do like this. If you don't do like this, you'll be expelled. You'll be punished this way. You'll be punished that way. You'll be punished another way. This whole activity of sitting in the meal was a whole process of different things. You're sitting there, you're eating for a while. We'll talk about the dishes and how they show us that they'd eat there for a while, sort of Roman style. Quiet, or yes talking, or talking in order, not interrupting, not talking at all. Saying milim shertam, saying words of wisdom as you're inside. That's the experience over here, led, of course, by the leader, by the high priest, at the head of everything. Now, makes sense that next to, here, this is a video, next to the kitchen, we also have the pottery storeroom. So just to the right, moving over to the room on the right, that is our pottery storeroom. We mentioned the baker before, we mentioned the cook before, they'll come from there in order to bring, we mentioned the food inside. Now, there was a massive earthquake inside in the year 31 of the Common Era. As I mentioned, this place was in use until the year 68 when the Romans came through, 2 years before the destruction of the Second Temple. But years before, in the year 31 of the Common Era, there's a massive earthquake. Now, earthquakes are prevalent. Makes sense there'll be an earthquake because we're inside the Jordan Valley. We're inside of a massive rift where there are huge earthquakes relatively often. Now, what we can see inside this room is this is the bottom of a pillar that used to hold a roof on top, and many of the dishes that were inside of this room in the year 31 of the Common Era were shattered because everything came tumbling down. And we can talk about the numbers of what was found inside. For example, we can do, excuse me for not remembering this by heart, we can talk about 708 deep bowls. Don't remember the numbers, it just comes to give a bit of a feeling, an experience what's going on inside, how busy a place it was. 708 deep bowls were found inside, 210 flat plates, 75 cups, 38 deep large bowls, 21 jugs for containing liquids, 11 decanters for warm drinks. It's a lot. And if we have large bowls and jugs, this Roman style, people would sit for a long time. It was part of the experience over there to sit for a long meal It wasn't a quick meal like we maybe know at work today. Run. You have work, you run to grab a bite, eat a quick sandwich, and then go back to work. No, 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 no. You sit there. You talk, as we said before, the rules of talking. You'll eat for a while. You'll drink for a while. This is together time. It's part of your sect. It's part of your stream. It's part of the Judean sect stream in the dining hall. As I like to say, a room with the view. By the way, just walking around over here is gorgeous physically to see. I mean, you have the ancient archaeology, and beyond it you have, as you can see, the Dead Sea in the picture over here. That's to the east, to the west. On the other side behind me, as I was taking this picture, we already saw the cliffs, the dramatic Judean hills cliffs. So it's just an experience in and of itself to walk around, which is one of the reasons why I tried also giving this feeling with short videos. We can see in Qumran, and in one of the side rooms, there's a replica of pottery found in the storeroom, which is great to see. I do encourage also going to the Shrine of the Book, and over there you can see a lot of archaeological findings from daily life in Qumran, and over there you can see the original pottery that was found over there. So we ate, we went back to work in the afternoon. We said in the late afternoon hours, you go back again, second run of going to the mikveh, to the ritual bath, and then going to have your dinner, 2 meals, not 3 like today. You have 2 big meals back then. And now we come to the night study room. Now, as we enter the night study room, we're going to make our way inside. The groups that were in Qumran at the time were split into 3 different groups regarding study time at night. Mishmer, if you learned in yeshiva, I remember years ago I learned in yeshiva, you do mishmer, you sit the whole night, part of the night learning. This is what they did. They would have people sitting and learning in this room throughout the whole night, and they'd split the night up into 3 sections: the beginning of the night, middle of the night, and then the very early morning hours. Now, when we go inside into this room over here, let's go back a little bit. I want to control the video over here, so let's go back to the beginning. As we make our way in, I want you to notice, first of all, there are a few windows. There's 2 right in front of us over there, okay, on the other side of the sign. And there's another one on, I'm going to make a left. See right over there on the left side, there's a 3rd window. Now these windows, were used either to pass scrolls into a library, maybe on the side, or maybe as a kind of a shelf to put them on the side. What were found inside were little pottery lamps, okay, that would be lit, where you would sit, because you would sit and learn at night, so of course you need light. They have benches, windows to the library I mentioned. Now, here's the thing. The fire was always lit day and night, because it was hard, it was challenging and complicated to light a fire back then. It's not like today, you come with the match and no problem. So they left it lit all the time, day and night. The fears of a fire destroying the scrolls, right? The scrolls are sitting around over there. You may say, okay, but Ami, I'm looking at this room and it's all stone. I'll say, right, but is not there today, but was there 2,000 years ago, was the roof. Okay, the roof was made out of wood. What you had is large logs made out of the tree trunks of palm trees, which were cut in half, and that held the roof above you on top. And then it was covered with a lot of weavings together of branches from the palm trees in the area. Which basically means if you have a fire, all of that is going to burn and come crashing down, and it can also burn your scrolls, which is a risk. So you'd have the scrolls that you're working with, maybe writing or reading right then, very, very temporary presence over there. Where were they usually located? Now we're going to the caves. Remember, we started with the caves. They were all found in the caves. 11 caves around the Qumran area where you had parts of 930 scrolls torn up into about 20,000 pieces. How did they make it to the caves? The theory is because of this. If they were written in Qumran, some of them might have been written in other areas and then brought to Qumran, but assuming that many are also written in Qumran, you're not going to keep it in this room over here, but rather, what are you going to do? You're going to put it into caves. Now, there is the permanent cave for then, and then there's a permanent cave forever, if you want to call it that. What does that mean? So when we're walking around, here, let's turn this into the movie section. When we're walking around Qumran, and you go to the southern edge, the southwestern edge, you'll see the bedrock over here, okay? And you can see over here there's a cave. Right there's a cave. So we're moving. Let's just pause it for a second. Let's go back. We can see a cave just a minute, right over there. Sorry about that. We have this cave right over here. Now that cave over there is one of two caves. The other one is just around the corner from there in the cliffs. And it's in those caves that 16,000 parts was put together to about 500 scrolls were found. That's most of the scrolls when you think about it. So amongst their rooms, like the room that we were in before, they only leave some, like only a few scrolls that they're dealing with. Most of the time they'll put the scrolls in the caves over here because there wasn't the fear that they'd be burnt over there. Okay, there's nothing flammable inside over there. Now they'll be over there till when? When there is a fear of the enemy coming, they take the scrolls out of there. And what they would do is, and now we can continue with the video. Here, let's do, sorry about that. What they'll do is out in the distance, further out in the distance, in the cliffs, such as we saw before at the beginning of the virtual tour, they put a lot of the scrolls into those caves on the mountainside. The fears when the enemy is coming, they'll easily find the scrolls in the cave that's right over there that, I said where most of the scrolls were found. But if they put them deep out into the cliffs that we just saw moments ago in this video, the enemy won't think of coming to over there to find them. So that's the theory regarding the location of the scrolls that have been found. Here we see a picture. Here we can see the two caves, 4A and 4B, one over here, and here's the other one that most of the scrolls were found. The temporarily permanent site, the four of them being put into permanent site, if they were moved to there, onto the cliffs of the caves, out of fear that the enemy would discover them over there. Now, so we've spoken about the scrolls as a whole, the theme of the scrolls, the daily life of people, including their leaders, the high priests, if you want to call it that, making their way through the actual archaeology and the rooms of Qumran. But let's go even more down on a micro level to actual individuals that can apparently be identified from within the scrolls, even though their specific names are not written. And by doing that, we can also understand some of the thought process and the themes and the politics, if we want to use that word, that was going on at the time. So this is a quote really from Pesach Havakuk, from the Havakuk commentary scroll. And let's read it, and then let's try to explain what's going on over here. This concerns the wicked priest who pursued the teacher of righteousness to the house of his exile that he might confuse him with his venomous fury. And at the time appointed for rest, for the Day of Atonement, he appeared before them to confuse them and to cause them to stumble on the day of fasting, their Shabbat of repose. Oh, what's going on? So we have over here is, we have the teacher of righteousness. That's the leader in Qumran. Now the teacher of righteousness apparently comes originally from Jerusalem around the time of the Maccabees. Professor Eyal Regev from Bar Ilan University will talk about that there were tensions between what the teacher of righteousness calls the wicked priest. The wicked priest is going to be Yonatan the Chashmonai. Yonatan the Hasmonean is the brother Judah the Maccabees. Yonatan is going to now be the high priest, also the leader at the time, the political leader and the high priest, and there's going to be a lot of tensions, and he's going to be seen as the wicked priest, and a group of people are going to leave Jerusalem and going to leave the temple in anger, and they're going to go and live in the area of Qumran. And the teacher of righteousness will see Yonatan the Chashmonai, the Hasmonean, as the wicked priest. A lot of the tensions over here were regarding the Jewish yearly cycle. Now, according to some of the streams, in Qumran, the yearly cycle will be, it'll evolve and be calculated a little differently as opposed to the Jews in Jerusalem. Okay, we know every year we have the new month, we have the new moon, you have the witnesses that'll come to the priests in Jerusalem and talk about the new moon, and that is how you are able to create the yearly cycle of when we know when Rosh Hashanah is, and Yom Kippur, and Sukkot, and Pesach, and Passover, and whatnot in the whole year. The calculation will be different with the Judean desert streams, such as the Essenes and the others. And without getting to the whole calculated way, complicated way of how they calculate everything, let's keep it simple and simply say that as far as they're concerned, Shabbat is the most important days of the year. We have 52 Shabbatot. Nothing can fall on Shabbat. If we know in Judaism today, different holidays such as Yom Kippur can fall on Shabbat, all right? But within the streams in Qumran, that is not allowed. It always comes out on a Friday. Rosh Hashanah is always on a Wednesday. Yom Kippur is always on a Friday. There's an argument over here regarding the yearly cycle. Who controls the yearly cycle over here? And if Yochanan the Chashmonai says it's one way, we have the stream that's in Qumran saying it's another way. And on the day of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, it says over here, according to those who are in Qumran, on that day, Yochanan the Chashmonai, okay, the wicked priest, they're going to come to the Yom Kippur of the group that are in Qumran, and they're going to try to ruin that day for them. They're going to come and bother them on that day, saying to them, this is not Yom Kippur. What are you doing? It's on a different day. And on the time appointed for rest, Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, he appears before them to confuse them, to bother them, and to disrupt their day. I find this to be extremely cool, because from within the scrolls you can actually find historical individuals. Or if we bring another quote from Pesach Havakuk, from the commentary of Havakuk, it says, this concerns the last priests of Jerusalem, but in the last days shall be delivered into the hands of the army of the Kittim. It's apparently talking about around the year 63 before the Common Era, talking about 80 years after the time of, 70 some odd years after the time of Yochanan HaChashmonai. It's talking about the rival of the Romans, those are the Kittim, and Aristobulus and Hyrcanus II are fighting amongst themselves. And with all this internal fighting happening, Pompey and the Romans will conquer Jerusalem. So again, you have these quotes over here that talk about specific people, which I find to be absolutely fascinating. As I mentioned at the beginning of the virtual tour, just as fascinating as these scrolls are and trying to understand them from 2,000 years ago, it is, in my opinion, sometimes just as fascinating to understand how they were found today in the 20th and 21st centuries. The Temple Scroll. Okay, the Temple Scroll was discovered in the 1950s. Again, same person, Kando, this antiquities dealer who's the second man from the left over here with the turban on his head. He's going to get it into his hands. And in 1956, he's going to turn to Yigal Yadin, archaeologist, son of Professor Sukenik, mentioned at the beginning of the virtual tour, and Kando will offer to sell him the Temple Scroll for $1 million. Bit expensive, doesn't go, and Kando's going to keep the scroll by him. Now, this Temple Scroll is a description of a vision of what some of the streams in Qumran see the temple to look like in the future. It's not a description of the temple in their time at the end of Second Temple era, but it's of a futuristic temple, what in their eyes it should look like, what it should really look like. Now, the scroll is in Kando's hands from 1956. It'll take 11 years. Then in 1967 we have the Six-Day War. Kando lives in Bethlehem. Bethlehem was captured during the Sixth War in 67. Yigal Yadin at the time knows that the scroll is in Kando's hands, and he's going to send officers to his home to get the scroll from him. Kando's hidden it. He says, I'm not willing to tell you where it is. He's put in prison for 24 hours. Being in a cell for 24 hours apparently convinces him to tell the other people where the scroll is. Comes back to his home, takes the officers that are with him into his kitchen, pulls out a brick from his kitchen floor, and underneath it in a shoebox is the Temple Scroll. And the 11 years that the Temple Scroll spent in that shoebox underneath Kando's kitchen floor destroyed it a lot more than 2,000 years of sitting in the dry air of the Judean desert. By the way, that's what saved the scrolls for these 2,000 years. It's the dry air of the Judean desert. The rest of Israel is mostly humid, more or less, but that would have destroyed the scrolls. And that destroyed a lot of the Temple Scroll. Interestingly enough, that is in 1967, for the first time in 2,000 years, we'll get Jerusalem, the old city, the place of the temple that the Temple Scroll talks about, the Western Wall, to be in Jewish hands again. And it's specifically then that also the Temple Scroll will end up being in Jewish hands, which, by the way, was bought from Kando for the respectable sum of about $120,000. So he did get his money. He did get his money for it. Another very interesting scroll to talk about is called the Copper Scroll. It's like a treasure hunt. I always think of a movie that I watched growing up called The Goonies. They have this treasure hunt. They're going to look for treasures. Same thing with the Copper Scroll. The Copper Scroll was found in 1952. It was found as two rolled up scrolls made out of copper. Now, it took them 4 years to try and figure out how to open the scroll, the fear being that if they just try to unroll it, it'll disintegrate into dust and there'll be nothing left. 1956, it's brought to Manchester, England, and over there it was sawed open with a fine-tooth saw that was used for sawing skulls. Anyway, and it didn't ruin the scroll. They were able to open it up, and what they found in it was a list of treasures. Let's come back to this one in a minute. But when you counted all the treasures that it lists 63 different places around the Jerusalem and Judean desert area where you can go, walk up to the left and beyond the sun and underneath the tree, walk 5 marks to the right and then dig down, and you'll find X amount of treasures over there. People searched wide and far. Nothing has been found. Are the treasures out there to be found? Or is this all something imaginary? Who knows? But when you count all the treasures there, you'll find 4,630 silver and gold talents. A ton, you see the weight over there. 65 gold ingots, 619 silver and gold vessels, the clay vessels containing coins and additional treasures. Someone does eventually find out what we was. I like to say, just read one of the descriptions over here. If you want to go look for it, here's where you need to go. In the ruins in the valley of Achor, beneath the staircase that ascends toward the east, at a distance of 40 brick tiles, there's a silver chest and its vessels, weighing 17 talents. Anybody want? Next week we can organize a search group. Good luck trying to find where the heck that is. With that, those are some of the more known scrolls. At the end of the day, also, the people in Qumran will pass away, and on the eastern side, they found about 1,200 graves dating back to over 2,000 years ago. Josephus Flavius, who tries to describe the Essenes' way of life, will describe the souls he'll describe their way of seeing things. The souls are immortal and continue forever. When they are set free from the bonds of the flesh, they then rejoice and mount upward. People sometimes ask were there women over there, because Josephus described that the Essenes did not marry, or at least the more hardcore Essenes didn't marry. The other streams we're not so sure about. They mention it, they don't necessarily mention it. At the end of the day, apparently there were very few women, if at all. In Qumran, of the 1,200 graves, 93 were excavated. Only 9 females were found and no children. The Dead Sea Scrolls is one of the more fascinating topics in the modern day history of the state of Israel, created in 1948. It blew the imagination of anybody who was involved in it and found in it and hearing, listen, in Israeli society, and not just the Jewish world, but anybody who's interested in trying to understand our roots, our history over here. And as important things are put onto money, of course, in 1958, we can see this 10 lirot shtar over here of money, banknote. That's what I was looking for. On the back of it, we can see scroll. We can see, the original scrolls, a few of them at least, were found in a jug that looks like this today. Also, the jug can be found in the Shrine of the Book in the Israel Museum. And if today we go to the Israel Museum, you can go see some of the 7 original scrolls inside the Shrine of the Book. The Shrine of the Book is inside this white shape of the top of a jug over here. That's the idea, that it looks like the shape of the top of the jug. Here's the 2 scrolls that were found. Some of the original scrolls were found in them. We can see the water that's spritzing on it. We spoke about purity and impurity, mikvaot, ritual baths and whatnot, as the water is part of that. And we can see this black wall over here in front of the white over here, because the people of dark and the people of the night and the good and the bad play such a central role in these scrolls. And with that, I'll say, Toda Rabba, thank you very much. Please join next week. Looking forward to you joining us in Caesarea, walking hand in hand with Rabbi Akiva.